Renting in Quebec isn't simple, but knowing your rights is vital. What power do you have when renting from a new landlord or even an old one? The province recently passed new housing legislation, so we broke down some of the changes you may have missed and what you can do if you find yourself in a tricky situation. Are lease transfers allowed? It depends on your landlord. Up until recently, a building owner had to prove they had serious concern about a potential tenant to refuse a lease transfer. Bill 31 changed that. Now they can do it for any reason. So what happens if you see an ad for a lease transfer? One lawyer I spoke with recommends being skeptical. It doesn't mean that the transfer won't happen, but it could be a gamble. Can a landlord ask you to pay a deposit? They can only ask you for 1 month in advance, but additional fees like security deposits or a key deposit are illegal. Also, a landlord cannot ask you for post-dated checks. But remember, these rules are not enforceable with the Quebec Housing Administrative Tribunal unless there's a signed lease. This lawyer says there's something you can do.
If you can pay the amount, because it's illegal and because it's against public order, if you pay it, that doesn't mean you're admitting that it's okay to do that. So what people can do is pay the amount and then sign your lease, get your lease signed, and then ask the landlord to reimburse you.
So if you haven't yet signed a lease, you do still have some recourse. Housing advocates say if you believe you're being discriminated against, you can file a complaint with the Human Rights Commission.
They don't have any enforcement capabilities, but they can contact landlords rapidly, and sometimes the pressure of that does work on occasion.
Can a landlord kick you out for renovations? No. The province recently adopted a moratorium on evictions for things like transforming a space into commercial, making it bigger, or dividing it up. Now, a landlord can temporarily displace you if the unit needs major repairs. They need to demonstrate that those repairs are absolutely necessary, like there's a problem with the structure of the building. If you need to get out for less than a week, your landlord needs to give you at least 10 days notice. If it's going to take longer than that, they have to let you know at least 3 months in advance. Here's something important though. The landlord needs to cover the cost of your stay elsewhere and storage if necessary. The moratorium on renovictions will remain in place for 3 years or until the housing pressure eases. Do I have to accept my rent increase? You can reject an increase and renew your lease, but make sure you respond in writing. After that, your landlord has 1 month to negotiate or ask the Housing Administrative Tribunal to set the rent. The tax decision will be based on taxes and whether there was work done in the building. While that wheel is in motion, the current rent needs to be maintained. Experts recommend getting as much documentation as you can. Ask your landlord for expense receipts and do your own calculations before you reject the increase. The tribunal could decide you're not paying enough rent. Does your landlord have to show you the previous tenant's rent? Yes, your landlord has to show you the lowest rent paid over the last year. You should be able to find that in Section G of your lease. If you discover that your landlord is charging you more than the previous tenant, you can negotiate. If you can't come to an agreement, you have 10 days after signing the lease to ask the TAL to set the rent. What happens if you realize your landlord left Section G empty? The time is ticking, but you have 2 months to ask the TAL to do something about it. There are exceptions. The landlord does not have to disclose the previous rent if you're moving into affordable housing, new building, or an apartment that was not previously rented. If you need help navigating the complexity of finding a place to rent here in Quebec, you can always go to your local housing committee. If you risk ending up with absolutely nowhere to go, many municipalities, including Montreal, have a special 311 line for housing assistance. All of this is a lot of information, but knowing your rights and the resources available can help. And don't forget, you're not in this alone.